Welcome to Veiled Narrative Stories, where love isn't written in ink, it's carved by fate itself. Tonight's tale is one that reminds us that destiny never makes mistakes, even when it seems like everything has gone wrong. Hale had built his life around precision. Every moment in his day was planned, every decision calculated. As the CEO of Hale Enterprises, his world was made of contracts, deadlines, and immaculate perfection. Love, it had no place in his empire. He was supposed to meet the daughter of a business tycoon that evening, a potential merger both in business and life. It wasn't about romance, it was strategy. But as fate often does, it had a different script. When Ethan arrived at the grand restaurant, a woman sat at the reserved table. Her dress was simple, her hair slightly undone, and yet there was something undeniably captivating about her. Her name was Lena Carter. She smiled nervously as he sat down. "I'm sorry," she began softly. "I think there's been a mistake. I was supposed to meet someone named Mr. Hale. He owns this restaurant chain, I think." Ethan chuckled faintly, his curiosity piqued. "That would be me." Her eyes widened. "Oh no! I'm so sorry. I'm actually here for a job interview. The manager told me to meet Mr. Hale at this table." For a moment, silence hung between them. The kind that lingers not out of awkwardness, but out of an unspoken connection neither could explain. Ethan should have ended it there, called his assistant, and left for his real meeting. But instead, he stayed. They talked. About art, about books, about how life never seems to follow the script we write for it. Lena's words were unpolished, sincere, alive. She wasn't trying to impress him, she was just being herself. And for the first time in years, Ethan wasn't the CEO, he was just a man listening. Hours passed. When the real meeting guest arrived, perfectly dressed, perfectly rehearsed, Ethan didn't even notice. Days later, Lena received a call. She got the job. But what she didn't know was that Ethan had personally made the call to the HR department. He wanted her near, though he didn't quite understand why. Their paths began to cross often. In the elevator, the corridors, the quiet cafeteria. Each encounter carried that same magnetic pull. Ethan found himself smiling more, staying late not for work, but just to see her passing by. But the world they lived in wasn't kind to emotions. Whispers started. The CEO and the assistant. They said it could ruin reputations, contracts, everything he had built. So Ethan made the hardest decision. He distanced himself. Cold emails replaced warm smiles. Meetings turned formal. Lena felt it, the chill of a heart trying to unfeel what destiny had written, until one night, when fate intervened once more. Lena was leaving the office late. Rain pouring like the heavens themselves were restless. Her car wouldn't start. As she stood under the awning, drenched and defeated, a familiar black car pulled up. Ethan stepped out, umbrella in hand. "You shouldn't be walking in this weather," he said softly, his eyes betraying every emotion he tried to hide. She smiled faintly. "You shouldn't care, remember." His silence said everything. In that rain-soaked night, under the hum of city lights, he took a step closer. "Lena, I wasn't supposed to meet you. But somehow every path still led back to you." She whispered, "Maybe that's what fate is. Not what's planned, but what finds you anyway." And then, without another word, he kissed her. Not with urgency, but with the quiet realization that love, no matter how uninvited, is always meant to be. From that moment, Ethan stopped planning his life. He started living it, one heartbeat at a time, beside the woman fate had chosen for him all along. The city shimmered that evening, bathed in golden lights and whispers of rain on glass. Inside La Maison d'Or, one of the most exclusive restaurants in London, luxury hummed softly through every polished surface. Crystal chandeliers spilling light like liquid diamonds, violins humming softly in the background, and waiters gliding like ghosts of elegance. Ethan Hale entered, his presence cutting through the air like quiet authority. He was the kind of man who turned heads not because of his fame, though he had plenty, but because of the power that clung to him effortlessly. Every detail of his world was immaculate. The tailored black suit that framed his tall figure, the silver cufflinks engraved with his family crest, the quiet confidence of a man who built his empire from ambition and precision. He wasn't here for romance. Not tonight. Not ever. This dinner was supposed to be another calculated step in his empire. A meeting with the daughter of a business magnate, a woman of status, refinement, and financial power. A merger both on paper and in name. Love wasn't a part of the equation, it never had been. But fate, as it often does, had rewritten the script. When Ethan approached the reserved table by the window, His sharp eyes caught sight of a woman sitting there. Not the elegant heiress he expected, but someone entirely different. Her dress was simple, a soft beige that whispered rather than shouted. Her hair framed her face in loose waves, slightly tousled, like she had been caught in the evening rain. She looked real. Too real for this polished world. She rose when he approached, nervous but with a kind of unstudied grace. "Mr. Hale?" she asked, her voice gentle and certain. "Yes," he replied, intrigued. Her eyes widened with realization, a flush blooming on her cheeks. "Oh no, there's been a mistake. I was told to meet Mr. Hale here for a job interview. I didn't realize." He smiled faintly, a rare softness crossing his usually stoic face. "You're here for an interview?" She nodded, clutching a worn leather folder. "Yes, sir. I applied for the executive assistant position." For a long moment, Ethan said nothing. The logical part of him knew he should correct this, call his assistant, fix the mix-up, move on. But instead, he sat down. Something about her tone, her honesty, felt refreshing. "Then let's call this an unconventional interview," he said, motioning for her to sit. Her surprise was evident, but she obeyed, her nervous laughter softening the tension. The conversation began awkwardly, but soon unfolded with unexpected ease. Lena Carter was unlike anyone Ethan had met. She spoke about dreams with the sincerity of someone who still believed in them. She didn't use business jargon or flattery. She spoke from the heart. About art, her love of painting skies, her belief that beauty could be found even in broken places. Ethan found himself listening more than talking, something he hadn't done in years. As the violin music swelled, he caught himself studying the light in her eyes, how it shifted when she smiled, how her hands moved when she spoke. She was not composed like the women he usually met, she was alive in a way that unsettled him. Time slipped past them unnoticed. What was supposed to be a formal dinner became something softer, deeper. For the first time, Ethan forgot about business, mergers, or calculated outcomes. When the waiter finally cleared the table, Lena looked embarrassed. "I've kept you too long. You must have important people to meet." He smiled, a slow, knowing smile that reached his eyes. "I think I already met someone important." Her breath caught, though she said nothing. She simply nodded, gathering her things, her eyes darting to the rain streaking the windows. 1,000 unsaid things shimmering between them. The moment she left, Ethan felt something he hadn't in years: stillness. A pause in the constant motion of his structured world. Later that night, as he sat in the back of his sleek black car, he found himself staring at the city lights and thinking not about contracts or deals, but about her laugh. The way it had filled that cold, expensive room with warmth. He didn't know it yet, but that accidental meeting was about to shift the axis of his carefully balanced world. Fate had quietly stepped in, disguised as a mistake. Lena Carter wasn't the woman he was supposed to meet. But she was undeniably the woman he needed to meet. She had walked into his world by chance, but something deep inside him already knew. She would not be leaving easily. For the first time in his perfectly planned life, Ethan Hale couldn't predict what came next. And for reasons he couldn't explain, he didn't want to. The following week at Hale Enterprises unfolded like a dream neither Ethan nor Lena could quite define. The office tower stood tall against the skyline, sleek, glass, bound and impossibly modern, a place where precision and power breathed in every corridor. Inside its marble halls, people spoke in hushed tones, walking briskly under the weight of ambition. But amidst the hum of success and the rhythm of control, there was now something different, something softer. Lena Carter. Ethan told himself her hiring had been a professional decision. She was qualified, he reasoned. Intelligent, articulate and humble, a refreshing contrast to the cutthroat personalities he usually dealt with. But beneath that logic, something deeper pulsed. The memory of her laughter in the candlelight, her eyes reflecting sincerity in a world where everything else was an act. Every morning, she arrived before anyone else, a soft presence in the chaos, greeting people with a warmth that made the cold office feel strangely human. She wasn't polished like the others, but there was something about her that drew people in, a quiet elegance wrapped in simplicity. And though she tried to stay invisible, Ethan always noticed. He noticed the way she tucked her hair behind her ear when she was focused, the way she bit her lip when typing too fast, the way her laughter seemed to slip past his walls without permission. She was everything his world wasn't: unpredictable, unscripted, real. One evening, Ethan was the last to leave. He had been staring at the city skyline from his penthouse office. the night alive with rain and neon reflections. He didn't hear Lena enter until her soft voice broke the silence. "Sir, you're still here?" He turned, and for a heartbeat, his perfectly balanced world paused. She stood at the door, framed by the dim golden light, her hair slightly wet from the rain, her dress a deep navy that caught the glow like the ocean under moonlight. She looked breathtaking in her unintentional grace. "I was just finishing up," he replied, though the untouched papers on his desk told another story. She stepped inside hesitantly. "I brought the final reports. You said you needed them before tomorrow." When she handed them over, their fingers brushed. It was a fleeting contact, but electric. A spark that both felt and neither acknowledged. She tried to pull her hand away, but his gaze caught her mid-motion, lingering just long enough to make her breath catch. "Lena," he said quietly, his tone softer than it should have been. "Do you ever wonder how we end up in places we never planned to be?" She looked at him, puzzled. "All the time," she said honestly. "I think life doesn't care much for our plans. It just takes us where we're meant to go." He smiled faintly, a hint of vulnerability breaking through his polished calm. "You really believe that?" She nodded. "Yes. I think the wrong turns are sometimes the ones that lead us home." Her words lingered in the air. Heavy, beautiful, undeniable. For a moment, Ethan forgot who he was supposed to be. The controlled, untouchable man of success. In that quiet space, with the storm whispering against the windows and her eyes reflecting pure sincerity, he was simply a man fighting not to fall. "Thank you for the reports," he said finally, though his voice carried more meaning than the words deserved. She smiled softly, turning to leave, but before she reached the door his voice stopped her again. "Lena." She looked back, her hand on the doorframe. "Next time," he said, a trace of warmth in his tone, "don't call me sir." The way he said it, low, deliberate, sent a shiver through her. She nodded slowly, her lips curving into the faintest smile, before she disappeared into the hallway. That night, Ethan didn't sleep. His thoughts were a storm. Memories of her voice, her laughter, the way she looked at him without the weight of expectation. For the first time, he felt alive in his own life, and that terrified him. Over the next few days he found excuses to see her. A question about a report that didn't really need answering, a document that somehow required her signature. Each encounter was brief, but magnetic. The air between them thickened with unspoken words, glances that lingered too long, silences that said too much. In the elevator, their reflections would meet in the mirrored walls, their eyes dancing between formality and desire. In the conference room, his gaze would drift to her unconsciously, tracing the way her lips moved as she took notes. He tried to fight it, tried to remind himself that this was wrong, that she was an employee, and he had an image to protect. But the heart doesn't care for titles or power, and Lena, in her quiet grace, had already found the one weakness he never planned to have. One evening, when the office was empty again, he found her sketching in her notebook. The city skyline, drawn with delicate strokes. He stood there for a moment, just watching her. The same hands that typed reports for him every day could create something so soft, so alive. "You draw," he said, stepping closer. She startled slightly, then smiled. "It helps me think. It's how I unwind." He studied the drawing. It was the view from his office window. "You drew this?" She nodded. "It's beautiful up here. Cold, but beautiful." His voice dropped, barely above a whisper. "It doesn't have to be cold." She looked up at him, caught off guard, and in that instant something shifted again. The distance between them vanished, not in touch, but in the ache of everything left unspoken. It was in that silence, between heartbeats, between fear and longing, that Ethan Hale realized something terrifyingly simple: he was falling. And this time, there would be no plan to save him. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of Hale Enterprises carried on. Contracts signed, deals closed, fortunes exchanged. Yet beneath the glossy surface of business perfection, something unspoken bloomed quietly. Something both dangerous and divine. Ethan Hale, the man who once ruled his empire with absolute control, was now losing that control, piece by piece. Every time Lena Carter entered a room, he tried to ignore it, tried to remind himself of who he was, of what the world expected from him. But every glance, every accidental brush of her hand, every moment where their eyes met across a crowded hallway, it pulled him deeper into a gravity he could not escape. Lena, too, felt it. She sensed the subtle shifts, The way his tone softened when speaking to her, how his gaze lingered a moment too long, how his silence held emotions words could never carry. She had never known power like his, yet she never felt small around him. His presence was commanding, yes, but with her, he was different, human. One evening, after an exhausting board meeting, Ethan called her to his office. The sun had just dipped below the skyline, leaving behind a trail of amber light that spilled across the glass walls. The city shimmered below like a sea of fireflies. "Come in," he said when she knocked softly. She stepped inside, holding a folder against her chest. "You asked to see me, Mr. Hale." His lips curved faintly. "I thought we agreed you'd stop calling me that." She smiled, a shy glimmer that lit up the room. "Right, Ethan." The way she said his name, quietly, like it was something precious, stirred something deep inside him. He motioned toward the window. "Come here." She hesitated, then joined him by the glass. From this height, the city looked endless. The hum of traffic below sounded distant, unreal. For a moment they just stood there, the world hushed beneath their silence. "Do you ever feel," he began, his voice low, "like you're standing in the middle of everything you thought you wanted, and yet something's missing?" Lena looked up at him, her reflection merging with his in the glass. "All the time. Maybe that's why we keep searching, even when we don't know what for." Ethan turned toward her fully then, his gaze tracing her face with quiet intensity. "And what are you searching for, Lena?" She hesitated. "Something real?" He took a slow breath, as though those words reached somewhere he'd kept locked away for years. "Real," he echoed softly. "That's hard to find in my world." "Maybe you're looking in the wrong places," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The moment stretched, fragile, suspended, and charged. The golden city lights framed them like a painting, the powerful man, and the woman who unknowingly unraveled him. Without thinking, Ethan reached out, his fingers brushing a strand of hair from her face. It was a simple gesture, gentle, almost reverent, yet it carried the weight of everything unsaid. Her breath hitched, her eyes lifting to his. "Lena," he murmured, her name leaving his lips like a confession. But before he could say more, she stepped back slightly, her pulse racing. "Ethan, this isn't right," she said softly, though her eyes betrayed her words. "You're my boss. People talk. You have a reputation and I—" She stopped herself, unsure of what to say next. He took a slow step forward, his voice rich and sincere. "Do you really think I care what they say?" "You should," she whispered. "This is your world. You built it on control and power. I'm just—" He cut her off gently, his tone filled with emotion. "You're not just anything." The silence that followed was heavy, charged with longing and restraint. The city lights flickered through the glass, casting gold on her skin. For a moment, neither moved, both caught between reason and desire. Finally she lowered her gaze, her voice trembling. "Ethan, don't make this harder." He smiled faintly, though it was tinged with pain. "It's already too late for that." The sound of her name on his lips, the honesty in his eyes, it was too much. Lena turned away, gripping the edge of his desk to steady herself. "I can't," she said softly. "Not like this." He exhaled slowly, knowing she was right. She was purity in a world that had long forgotten the meaning of it. And he was the storm that could ruin her if he wasn't careful. "All right," he said finally, his voice low. "But don't ask me to pretend I don't feel this." Her eyes met his again, and in them was everything neither dared to say. When she finally left, the office felt colder. The scent of her perfume lingered faintly in the air, soft and haunting. Ethan stood by the window long after she was gone, watching the rain begin to fall against the glass. He thought he could master every challenge, every risk, every opponent. But love was different. Love wasn't a battle to win, it was surrender. And in his heart, he knew, he was already surrendering. That night, as thunder rolled over the city, Lena lay awake in her small apartment, staring at the ceiling. Her thoughts were a storm of confusion and desire. She shouldn't want him. She knew the rules. Yet every time she closed her eyes, she saw his face, heard his voice, the warmth in his tone when he said her name. And somewhere, miles away in his penthouse of glass and silence, Ethan Hale felt the same ache, the kind of longing that only destiny could create, and only love could calm. The world inside Hale Enterprises glittered with glass and power. But beneath that shimmer, whispers had begun to rise. Nothing escaped the attention of those who thrived on gossip. The soft glances, the 2 long silences between Ethan Hale and his assistant, People noticed, and in a world driven by perception, rumors spread like perfume in the air, subtle, intoxicating, and impossible to contain. Lena felt it first: the stares, the hushed conversations that ended the moment she entered a room. Every smile at the coffee machine, every polite greeting, they all carried a hidden question. Was it true? But she said nothing. She carried herself with quiet dignity, pretending not to notice the way the world was changing around her. Yet when she caught sight of Ethan across the hallway, surrounded by executives and flashing cameras, her heart would still betray her, skipping in that familiar rhythm of longing and fear. Ethan, too, felt the shift. His once serene empire now felt fragile, as if one wrong step could shatter everything. He tried to protect her, keeping their interactions strictly professional during the day, even as his heart rebelled against every cold word he had to speak. But at night, restraint melted into something beautifully dangerous. There were stolen moments, brief, breathtaking fragments of a love neither could name aloud. A quiet dinner in his penthouse, far from the world's gaze, a soft touch on her hand when he passed her a file. The way their eyes met when no one else was looking. It wasn't just desire. It was something deeper. A connection that felt older than time itself, something that refused to be buried beneath status and fear. One evening, after an exhausting gala hosted by the company, Ethan found himself searching the crowded ballroom for her. The chandeliers above cast golden light on hundreds of guests. Women in glittering gowns, men in suits worth fortunes, but none of them caught his attention. Only her. Lena stood near the far end of the room, her dress a flowing shade of emerald that shimmered like liquid silk. Her hair cascaded down in soft curls, and the diamond lights reflected in her eyes like stars. She looked ethereal, out of place and yet perfectly meant for this world of opulence. When their eyes met across the room, it was as though time folded in on itself. The crowd, the music, the glitter, everything faded, leaving just them. He walked toward her, each step measured, confident, but his heart thundered with something dangerously real. "You shouldn't be here alone," he murmured when he reached her, his tone low enough for only her to hear. She smiled faintly, her voice steady despite the chaos in her chest. "I thought I'd give you space. You've been surrounded all evening." He studied her quietly, eyes tracing her features like he was memorizing them. "You know I'd trade this entire room for one quiet moment with you." Her lips parted slightly, her heart caught between temptation and reason. "Ethan," she warned softly. But he was already lost. "Tell me to stop," he whispered, stepping closer. "Tell me to walk away and I will." She said nothing. The music swelled, a slow, haunting melody, and he offered his hand. Hesitation flickered in her eyes, but it dissolved when she felt the warmth of his palm. As they danced, the world blurred into gold and shadow. His hand rested on her back, firm but tender. Her fingers brushed against the fabric of his tuxedo, feeling the strength beneath. They moved in silence. No words, just the unspoken language of hearts that had run out of reasons to deny what they felt. "I shouldn't be doing this," she whispered, her breath trembling against his chest. "Neither should I," he murmured back. "But here we are. For that one stolen dance, everything else disappeared. The rumors, the rules, the world. It was just them. And though it ended with the applause of the crowd in their hearts, something eternal had begun. But fate, relentless as always, doesn't let forbidden love hide for long. A week later, an article appeared. A single photograph on the cover of a glossy business magazine. Ethan Hale, hand resting on Lena Carter's back, their eyes locked mid-dance. The headline read, "The CEO's secret lover scandal." The world exploded. Investors questioned his judgment, the board demanded answers, and his rivals smelled blood in the water. Ethan's empire trembled. But what hurt most wasn't the accusations. It was the look in Lena's eyes when she walked into his office that morning. A mixture of fear, heartbreak, and apology. "They're going to destroy you because of me," she said softly, her voice breaking. "I can't let that happen. Lena, I'm resigning," she continued, tears gathering in her eyes. "It's the only way to protect you." Ethan rose from behind his desk, his control finally slipping. "You think I care about that?" His voice cracked with emotion. "Let them talk. Let them burn it all down. You're the only thing that's ever felt real in my life." She shook her head, tears falling freely now. "You don't understand. You'll lose everything." He stepped closer, his hands trembling as he cupped her face. "Then let me lose it. Because without you, it means nothing." Her heart shattered at the sincerity in his voice, at the man who had built an empire, now willing to risk it all for her. "I love you," she whispered, almost inaudibly, and he pulled her into his arms like a man claiming his truth after a lifetime of silence. The city roared outside, the storm of consequences waiting. But in that office, amid luxury and chaos, they finally stopped pretending. They were no longer CEO and assistant, no longer logic and restraint. They were simply two souls that fate refused to keep apart. Rain fell like diamonds against the city that night, soft, shimmering, relentless. The lights of London blurred into streaks of gold as the storm painted the skyline with melancholy. Inside his glass penthouse overlooking it all, Ethan Hale stood in silence, a man surrounded by wealth but stripped of peace. The woman who had brought warmth into his life was gone. Lena had left without saying goodbye, her resignation letter lying neatly on his mahogany desk. Only 2 sentences written in her graceful hand. "I'm sorry, Ethan. Some love isn't meant to survive the world that watches it." He read those words until they blurred, until the ink seemed to dissolve into the rain outside. The man who once mastered every deal, every risk, now stood powerless before the one thing he couldn't negotiate: fate. Days became weeks. The office felt hollow without her. Meetings that once filled his calendar now felt meaningless. Every decision, every signature carried the weight of absence. But love, true love, doesn't end in silence. It lingers, breathing in the spaces left behind. One evening, as the city prepared for Hale Enterprises' most important charity gala of the year, Ethan received news that shook him. Among the new invitations sent by his PR team was a familiar name: Lena Carter. She had started her own foundation for underprivileged artists, quietly making a difference in the shadows while the world still gossiped about her past. The gala was being held in partnership with her organization. For the first time in months, Ethan felt his heart awaken. Fate, it seemed, wasn't done with them yet. When he entered the ballroom that night, the world seemed to pause. The chandeliers glowed like constellations, music swelled through the air, and the scent of white roses lingered like a promise. But all he saw, all he felt, was her. Lena stood near the art display, her presence as radiant as it was haunting. Her gown was ivory silk, simple yet breathtaking, flowing like liquid moonlight. Her hair was pinned softly at the back, and her eyes, those eyes that had once undone him, shone with quiet grace. For a moment, neither moved. The world around them blurred into insignificance. Then, as though drawn by something beyond reason, Ethan crossed the room. "Lena," he said softly, her name like a prayer on his lips. She turned, her breath catching the moment she saw him. Time had changed him. His eyes carried more shadows now, more depth. But when he looked at her, everything else melted away. "I didn't think you'd come," she whispered. "I almost didn't," he confessed, his voice low and raw. "But then I remembered what you said. That some love isn't meant to survive the world that watches it. I realized, I don't care who's watching anymore." Her eyes glistened. "Ethan, you lost so much because of me. Your name, your company's image." He took her hand gently, his thumb brushing against her skin with reverence. "Lena, everything I lost was replaceable. You weren't." Silence fell between them, heavy, intimate, unspoken. Around them, the gala continued, but they were no longer part of it. "I thought walking away would protect you," she said quietly, "but all it did was break me." Ethan's chest rose and fell, his composure unraveling with every word. "You don't protect love by running from it. You protect it by fighting for it, even when it hurts." He reached into his jacket and pulled out something small, a folded, time-worn napkin. She blinked in surprise. "You kept that?" she asked, recognizing it instantly. The restaurant napkin from the night they first met, her handwriting scribbled on it by accident when she'd taken notes nervously during their mistaken meeting. "I kept everything," he said softly. "Every message, every sketch you left on your desk, every moment that reminded me what it felt like to be alive." Her tears fell freely now, glimmering like jewels in the low light. He reached up, wiping one away, his touch tender, reverent. "I don't have a plan anymore," he whispered. "I'm tired of pretending that power and reputation mean more than the way I feel when I look at you." Her voice trembled. "And what if fate pulls us apart again?" He smiled faintly. "Then I'll find you again. Because fate didn't bring us together by mistake, Lena. It just wanted us to understand the price of something real." The orchestra began to play a slow, haunting melody, the same one that had filled the room the night of their first dance. Without asking, Ethan extended his hand. "Dance with me," he said quietly. Lena hesitated for a heartbeat, then placed her hand in his. The moment their fingers touched, the air changed, charged, electric, infinite. As they moved together under the golden chandeliers, time seemed to dissolve. Every step, every glance, spoke the words their hearts had held for too long. Around them, the world watched, but neither cared. She looked up at him, her lips trembling with emotion. "You really think we can rewrite fate?" He leaned closer, his voice a whisper against her ear. "We already are." The music swelled, wrapping them in a cocoon of sound and light. For that one perfect moment, there were no mistakes, no barriers, only two souls finally finding home in each other. When the song ended, applause echoed around the ballroom, but Ethan and Lena stood still, foreheads pressed together, lost in a silence that said more than words ever could. Outside, the storm had stopped. The rain had given way to a clear sky, and above the glittering city, the stars finally broke through. Fate had other plans indeed, not to separate them, but to teach them what love truly means, to lose, to fight, and to find each other again. In a world of luxury and illusion, theirs was the one story that refused to fade. She wasn't the woman he was meant to meet. She was the woman he was meant to keep. And this time, nothing, not power, not pride, not the world itself, could take her away again. And so, beneath the same city lights that once witnessed their heartbreak, Ethan and Lena found their way back to each other. Not by chance, but by choice. Fate may have written the beginning of their story, but it was love, fierce, imperfect, undeniable love, that wrote the rest. She wasn't the woman he was meant to meet, but she became the woman he could never let go of. In her eyes he found peace, in his arms, she found home. The world that once tore them apart now stood silent before the power of what they had rebuilt. A love that didn't just survive the storm, but became it. Because sometimes, the universe doesn't give you what you ask for. It gives you what you need. And when two souls are truly meant for each other, destiny doesn't ask for permission. It simply finds a way. This has been another heart-stirring tale from Veiled Narrative Stories, where love meets fate, and every ending hides a beginning.